The most dangerous document Laura Ashwell had ever held was not the letter from her husband's solicitor explaining the debts. It was not the notice from the bank, or the inventory of assets that would need to be liquidated, or the list of creditors arranged in the order of their patience, which turned out to be shorter than anyone had represented. The most dangerous document was the one she was holding now, a single card, cream-colored, engraved with a name she recognized, and a request written beneath it in a hand so precise it looked like a legal instrument. I would like to speak with you about a matter of mutual benefit. T. Ashford, Marquis of Blackwell. She had been a widow for 4 months. She had been nearly ruined for 3. She had been pretending, with the focused energy of someone whose survival depends on the quality of their performance, that neither of these things was true, for all of them. The card had arrived on a Tuesday morning, while she was in the middle of calculating for the 4th time in a week whether the sale of the Hartfield silver could be managed quietly enough that it would not reach the ears of Lady Cavendish, whose ears were the primary receiving station for everything in London that anyone wished to keep private. The calculation was not going well. The silver was significant. Significant things were noticed. Noticed things were discussed. Discussed things became, in the specific alchemy of London society, fact. And fact, in Laura's current situation, was the one thing she could not afford. She set the card down on the desk beside the silver inventory. She picked it up again. Thomas Ashford, Marquis of Blackwell, was not a man she knew well. She knew him the way one knows all figures of sufficient prominence in London society, by reputation, by observation across drawing rooms, by the accumulated second-hand testimony of people who had encountered him and formed opinions. The opinions were consistent. He was intelligent, implacable, and possessed of a quality of attention that made people feel simultaneously seen and assessed. He had no enemies that anyone mentioned, which she had always found more interesting than if he had had many, because the absence of declared enemies usually meant either that everyone liked you or that no one considered you safe to oppose. She did not know which applied to Thomas Ashford. She was not sure the distinction mattered. She wrote back, "I am available Thursday at 3. Lady Ashwell." She posted the letter before she could reconsider, which was, she had learned in 4 months of widowhood, the only reliable method for making decisions she was afraid of. He arrived at 3 o'clock precisely, which told her something. People who arrived precisely on time had decided that punctuality was a form of communication, not merely a social convention. It said, "I take this seriously. I take you seriously. I have allocated exactly the time I said I would." She received him in the drawing room, the one room in the Ashwell townhouse that she had maintained at full standard, because the drawing room was where visitors formed impressions, and impressions were currently the primary currency she had left. The flowers were fresh. The fire was adequate. The silver tea service on the side table was the one piece she had specifically decided not to sell, because a drawing room without a proper tea service communicated something she was not prepared to communicate. Thomas Ashford was tall. She had known this from across drawing rooms, but had not fully accounted for what it meant in a normal-sized room. He was perhaps 35, with the kind of face that had been handsome in its youth, and had become, with age and whatever experiences had shaped it, something more interesting than handsome, angular, precise, with dark eyes that confirmed everything the second-hand testimony had suggested about the quality of his attention. He bowed. She inclined her head. "Lord Blackwell," she said. "Lady Ashwell," he said. "Thank you for receiving me. You indicated a matter of mutual benefit," she said. "I find I have a present interest in mutual benefit." The corner of his mouth moved, a fractional shift that was not quite a smile, and was more informative than a smile would have been. "Yes," he said. "I was aware of that." She gestured to the chair across from her. He sat. She poured tea with the composure of someone who has been doing this for 15 years, and whose hands have been steady through considerably worse than a conversation with a marquis. "Then, I will not waste your time with preliminary courtesy," he said. "I will say what I have come to say, and you may respond as you see fit." "Please," she said. He looked at her steadily. "I am aware of your current financial situation," he said. "Not in detail. I'm not in the habit of acquiring information about people's private affairs without cause, but in its general shape, which is visible to anyone paying attention, and I pay attention." He paused. "I am also aware that the situation is more urgent than you have allowed society to understand, and that the margin between your current position and a public collapse of your circumstances is considerably narrower than it appears." Laura held his gaze. She did not confirm or deny this. She waited. "I am in need of a wife," he said, "not for the conventional reasons. My reasons are specific, and I will explain them if you decide to hear more. What I am proposing is a legal marriage, a genuine one, registered, acknowledged, conducted with full propriety, that would provide you with my name, my financial resources, and whatever protection my position affords, in exchange for your presence in my household and your assistance with a specific situation that I am not yet able to fully describe." The room was very quiet. "So you are proposing," Laura said, "that I marry you?" "Legally," he said. "Yes. You said that word specifically," she said. "Legally. As distinct from what?" "As distinct from arrangements that appear to be marriages and are not," he said. "I want to be clear. I am proposing a real marriage, not a performance, not an agreement that can be dissolved when it becomes inconvenient. A marriage." He paused. "The emotional content of it is something I cannot promise and will not pretend to, but the legal and material substance of it I am prepared to commit to fully." Laura set down her teacup with the careful precision of someone buying time to think. She had been married once to Edward Ashwell, in a ceremony that had been everything a marriage of her station was supposed to be. The correct family, the correct settlement, the correct social acknowledgement. Edward had been pleasant and unremarkable, and genuinely kind, and she had been fond of him in the specific way of someone who has been given exactly what they were told to want, and has accepted it without fully examining whether it was what they actually needed. He had died 14 months ago of a fever, and the grief she had felt was real, and the financial disaster his death had revealed was also real, and the combination had produced in her a quality of attention to the actual mechanics of her situation that the previous years had not required. She was 28 years old. She was intelligent, capable, and almost ruined. She was being offered a solution by a man she did not know, for reasons he had not yet explained, on terms that were simultaneously more honest and more alarming than anything she had expected when she wrote her reply on Tuesday. "You said your reasons are specific," she said. "I would like to hear them." He looked at her for a moment, the dark eyes doing their assessment. "I have a ward," he said, "a girl of 12, my late cousin's daughter, who is in my care and has been for 3 years. She is intelligent and somewhat—" He paused, selecting the word with care. "Unconventional. The situation she is in requires a household that can present itself as stable and properly constituted to the relevant authorities, who are currently being pressed by another branch of the family to challenge my guardianship on the grounds that a single man's household is not a suitable environment for a girl of her age." He looked at her steadily. "A married household would resolve this challenge. My ward's stability and future are not negotiable. I will do what is required to secure them." Laura looked at him. "You are doing this for a 12-year-old girl," she said. "Yes," he said. "That is either the most selfless thing I have heard in some time," she said, "or the most effective possible way to make your proposal sympathetic." "It is both," he said without any defensiveness. "I am not going to pretend I don't understand the effect of saying it, but it is also simply true." She looked at him for a long moment. "Tell me about the girl," she said. "Her name was Clara." Thomas described her with the specific, affectionate precision of someone who has spent 3 years paying close attention to a person and has arrived at a comprehensive understanding of them, their particular qualities and their particular difficulties, the things they needed and the things they refused, the ways they were exceptional and the ways they were simply 12 years old and uncertain of their place in the world. Clara was clever in the mathematical way, numbers and patterns and the particular logic of things that worked according to rules, which she found reassuring in a life that had, since her parents' deaths 3 years ago, contained a significant amount of the opposite. She was also, Thomas said, entirely honest in a way that had caused several of his staff to find her simultaneously wonderful and exhausting, because Clara's assessment of any situation was accurate and unfiltered, and delivered with the completeness of someone who had not yet learned that precision and tact were sometimes intention. "She sounds remarkable," Laura said. "She is," Thomas said. "She is also currently being used as a piece in a legal dispute by people who do not particularly care about her welfare, and care very much about the trust that was established in her parents' will." He paused. "I will not allow her to be moved to a household run by people who see her as an asset. I will not allow that." The force of this, quiet, contained, entirely without performance, was the most informative thing he had said since he walked through the door. Laura thought about Clara, who was 12 and mathematical and honest, and living in the household of a man who had just described her to a stranger with more precise affection than most parents used to describe their own children. She thought about what it would mean to be 12 and have your future decided by adults in drawing rooms who were conducting negotiations about you. "I would like to meet her," Laura said. Thomas was quiet for a moment. "Before you decide?" he said. "Yes," she said. "Before I decide." He nodded. "That is fair," he said, and meant it. Clara Ashford was 12 years old, 4 feet 9 inches tall, and possessed of the specific quality of attention that Laura had previously encountered only in adults who had spent years developing it, and in very young children who had not yet learned to look away from things. In Clara it appeared to be simply natural, an orientation toward the world that registered everything and concealed very little of what it registered. She met Laura in the morning room of Blackwell House on a Saturday, in the presence of Thomas, who sat to one side in the particular posture of someone who is observing without directing. Clara sat across from Laura with her hands in her lap and looked at her with the focused assessment of someone conducting a serious evaluation. "You are the widow," Clara said. "I am," Laura said. "Thomas says you are intelligent," Clara said. "He does not say that about most people." "That is a considerable recommendation," Laura said. "What does he say about most people?" "He says they are adequate," Clara said, "or sufficient. Sometimes he says they are well-meaning, which is his least complimentary assessment because it implies that their intentions are better than their execution." Laura glanced at Thomas, who had the expression of a man who has been accurately described and has decided that the accurate description is not something he is going to contest. "What does he say about you?" Laura asked Clara. "He says I am exceptional," Clara said without self-consciousness. "He also says I am occasionally exhausting, which I believe is accurate, and that my honesty would be more effective if I developed patience alongside it, which I am working on." She paused. "I am better at the honesty than the patience." "Most people are," Laura said. Clara looked at her steadily. "Are you going to marry him?" she said. "I am considering it," Laura said. "Why are you considering it?" Clara said. "Not the reasons you would give socially, the real ones." Laura looked at this 12-year-old girl who had asked, with perfect precision, exactly the question that needed asking, and decided that the only appropriate response was the truth. "Because I am in a difficult situation that this marriage would resolve," she said, "and because the terms your guardian has offered are honest ones, and because—" she paused, "because I have met very few people who would do what he is doing for the reason he is doing it, and that tells me something about who he is that I find worth knowing more about." Clara considered this with the focused attention she brought to everything. "That is a good answer," she said. "It is honest, and it does not pretend to more than it is." She looked at Laura for another moment. "I would like you to marry him," she said. "I think you are the kind of person who pays attention to what is actually happening, rather than what is supposed to be happening." "I find that useful." Thomas, in his chair to the side, said nothing, but Laura, glancing at him, saw in his expression something she had not yet seen there, a softening, fractional and brief, that was not sentiment exactly, but was what sentiment looks like in a person who has learned to keep it very controlled. "I will consider it seriously," Laura told Clara. "That is the most honest thing I can offer you right now." "It is enough," Clara said. "Serious consideration is more than most people give anything." She agreed on Monday. She sent a note to Blackwell House that was brief and direct, in the manner she had decided was the correct register for all communication with Thomas Ashford. "I accept the terms as discussed. I would like to meet with your solicitor this week to understand the legal specifics. L.A. His reply arrived within the hour. "Thursday at 10. I will be present if you wish it, or absent if you prefer to conduct the meeting without me. T.A." She wrote back, "Present, please." And then, because she had decided that honesty was going to be the only viable foundation for whatever this was, added, "I find I make better decisions when I understand who I am dealing with, and I understand you better in person than through legal documents." His reply to this was a single line, "As do I." The solicitor meeting was on Thursday, as arranged, and lasted 2 hours, and covered the legal dimensions of the proposed marriage with a thoroughness that Laura appreciated, because it left no room for misunderstanding. Her debts would be absorbed by the Blackwell estate. The Ashwell townhouse, which she had been intending to sell, would be retained as a property under the marriage settlement, secured against the possibility of future need. She would have her own accounts, managed independently, with a quarterly settlement sufficient to maintain genuine financial autonomy. The arrangement was not charity dressed as a contract. It was a contract that happened to resolve her immediate crisis, which was precisely the distinction she had needed to have confirmed before she could agree to it in good conscience. Thomas sat beside her through the meeting and said very little, because the solicitor was competent and the documents were clear, and unnecessary speech was apparently not something he engaged in. Occasionally he asked a question, sharp, specific, directed at a point she had not yet noticed needed addressing, and she observed the quality of his legal mind, with the focused interest she brought to things that were genuinely impressive. Afterward, when the solicitor had gone, they sat in the meeting room with the documents between them, and Thomas said, "Are you certain?" "I am," she said. "Are you?" "I decided before I sent the card," he said. "I do not make proposals I am uncertain about." "Why me?" she said. "Specifically, there are other widows in London in difficult circumstances. Why Laura Ashwell?" He was quiet for a moment. That was not evasion, but genuine consideration. "Because you responded to an unexpected proposal from a man you did not know by asking to meet the child at the center of it," he said. "Before you asked about the financial terms, before you asked about the social implications." He looked at her. "Most people would have asked about the financial terms first." "The financial terms were recoverable information," she said. "What kind of person you were was not recoverable from a document." "No," he said, "it is not." They looked at each other across the solicitor's table, with the marriage documents between them and a great deal of unknown territory ahead, and Laura thought, "I do not know this man. I am going to marry him anyway. And I find, against all reasonable expectation, that this does not feel like a mistake." She was not yet ready to say that aloud, but she held it, privately, as a piece of information worth keeping. They were married on a Wednesday in March, in a ceremony that was designed to communicate exactly what they needed it to communicate. Legal, genuine, appropriate in every social dimension, and conducted with the quiet efficiency of people who have agreed on what the occasion requires and are not inclined to perform more than is necessary. Laura wore grey, a deliberate choice that positioned her correctly as a widow not yet out of half-mourning, which was both socially accurate and useful, because it communicated a seriousness of purpose that the occasion required. Thomas wore what Thomas always wore, which was clothing of extreme quality and absolute correctness that managed to look like it had been put on without consideration, which she was beginning to understand was a carefully maintained effect. Clara attended, in a dress that Mrs. Whitfield, the housekeeper, had clearly spent considerable effort on, and which Clara had clearly spent considerable effort not thinking about, because clothes were not among the things Clara considered worth her attention. She stood beside Thomas during the ceremony with the focused composure of someone who understands the significance of what they are witnessing and is taking it seriously. When the ceremony concluded and they were legally and properly the Marquess and Marchioness of Blackwell, Clara looked at Laura with the direct assessment she brought to all significant evaluations. "It is done," Clara said. "It is," Laura agreed. "Are you frightened?" Clara said. Laura considered this honestly. "A little," she said. "Are you?" Clara thought about it. "I am uncertain," she said, which is different from frightened. Frightened is when the outcome is likely to be bad. Uncertain is when you don't know yet what the outcome will be. She paused. "I prefer uncertain to frightened." "So do I," Laura said. Thomas, who had been within earshot of this exchange, said nothing. But when he offered Laura his arm to walk from the church, the gesture had the quality of something deliberate, not performed but chosen. She took his arm. They walked out into the March light. Blackwell House was larger than she had expected, and considerably more inhabited than its reputation, as the residence of a cold and implacable Marquess had led her to anticipate. The coldness she discovered in her first week was a description generated by people who had encountered Thomas Ashford in social or professional contexts where he had no reason to be warm, and who had interpreted the absence of performed warmth as the absence of warmth itself. What she found in a household that contained Clara and a staff of 20 and a library that occupied most of the East Wing was something considerably more complex. Mrs. Whitfield, the housekeeper, had been with the household for 18 years and ran it with the affectionate precision of someone who considers the people in her care a genuine responsibility rather than a professional obligation. The cook produced food of a standard that suggested someone in this household cared about it. Not the elaborate production of a house that entertained for social display, but the daily quality of a house where meals were taken seriously because the people who ate them were taken seriously. And Clara? Clara, Laura discovered over the first 2 weeks, was the organizing principle of Blackwell House in a way that Thomas had perhaps not fully articulated and possibly did not fully recognize. The household's routines, she observed, had arranged themselves around Clara's requirements. Her study hours, her particular need for quiet in the mornings and permission for noise in the afternoons, the specific quality of attention she required when she was working through a problem, and the different quality of attention she required when she was not. Thomas had built, without apparent awareness that he was doing so, a household designed to allow one 12-year-old girl to become fully herself. Laura found this, as she found most things about Thomas Ashford, considerably more than she had been prepared for. The challenge to Thomas's guardianship was filed in April, 6 weeks into the marriage, by a man named Robert Ashford, a cousin twice removed who had, by all accounts, never shown particular interest in Clara's welfare, and had shown a great deal of interest in the trust established by her parents' will. Thomas told Laura about it on a Tuesday evening in the library, with the direct economy he brought to all significant information. He explained the legal situation, the nature of the challenge, the timeline, and what it would require from both of them in terms of demonstrating the stability and propriety of their household. He was, she noted, entirely calm. "You expected this," she said. "I expected something like it," he said. "The timing is slightly earlier than I anticipated. The grounds are the ones I predicted." "You planned for it," she said. "The marriage, it was not reactive. You saw this coming, and you prepared." "Yes," he said. "How long ago?" she said. 8 months, he said, when Robert Ashford's solicitor made the first informal inquiry. "I began at that point to consider what resources I had available and what I would need." He paused. "I want to be clear. I did not. I chose you for reasons I described honestly, but I chose you when I did, because the timeline was becoming urgent." Laura absorbed this. 8 months ago," she said, "you began planning a marriage to resolve a legal challenge, and you selected me on the basis of what exactly? A widow in financial difficulty seemed convenient. A widow who, in the 4 months since her husband's death, had managed her situation with a precision and composure that told me she was someone capable of exactly what this arrangement would require," he said, "and who had done this without apparent self-pity or the kind of public collapse that would have made her unsuitable." He held her gaze. "I observed you for 2 months before I sent the card. I was not selecting a convenient solution. I was identifying the right person." The silence that followed was a particular kind, the silence of someone receiving information that is both more and less reassuring than they expected. "You watched me for 2 months," she said. "I paid attention to what was publicly observable," he said.